You know those mothers who are so tough, so fearless, that you start wondering if they were actually supposed to be born men, but God decided, nah, let's spice things up? Yeah. This is the story of one of those women. She's the kind of woman who, if she tells you to move a mountain, you don't ask how. You just start digging. And yet, behind that strength is tragedy, gossip, witchcraft accusations, machetes, and a son who grew up trying to make sense of it all. Our story is told through the eyes of Elang Sima, a boy looking back at his childhood, his family, and the small Gabonese village he grew up in. Now, let me warn you, this narrator has one serious quirk. He loves repetition. He keeps circling back to the same events, as if he's reminding himself, yes, that's how it really happened. I didn't imagine it. Think of it as storytelling with a rewind button. At the center of his memories is his mother, whom he simply calls Mema. And believe me, this woman is unforgettable.
You're goddamn right.
Mema wasn't your average village mother. Forget the stereotype of the quiet, submissive wife. No, Mema was bold, sharp-tongued, and always ready to take on responsibilities that were considered strictly for men. She attended community meetings, spoke fluently and cleverly, mixing her speeches with innuendos, proverbs, and wise sayings. People either loved her or hated her for it. To some, she was the wise, fearless woman who stood tall. To others, she was,
wait for it,
a witch. Because, of course, in a small village, a woman who outshines men has to be evil, right?
Get the phone out of my face.
Now, her husband, Mema's poor husband, was not exactly a strong presence in the household. In fact, some people thought she virtually beat him in every sense of the word. And then tragedy struck. Her husband fell gravely ill. Being the determined woman she was, Mema tried everything, every healer, every method, every possible remedy she could think of. But when nothing worked, she was left with one last option, the dreaded Mimbiri camp. Now, people had warned her, begged her, not to take her husband there. Those people are evil, they said. That place is dangerous. But Mema wasn't one to take no for an answer. She took up her machete, and with the kind of energy that said, "Stand in my way and see what happens," she dragged her husband to the camp. Sadly, he never returned. He died. And if that wasn't devastating enough, the very next day, both of Mema's daughters also died. Imagine that. Husband gone, daughters gone, all in the space of 2 days. You can probably already hear the whispers forming in the village. She's a witch. She's cursed. Stay away from her. From then on, Mema carried the stigma of being a witch, though no one dared confront her openly. She became the woman people feared but secretly admired, the one they gossiped about in whispers, but wouldn't face head-on. But Mema wasn't broken. Far from it. She poured all her energy into protecting her remaining son, Elang Sima, the narrator. For him, she had one vision. He must get a white man's education, because education was the new weapon, the path to becoming an important man, like Osuga Zemi, the eldest son of Mema's husband's sister, who was already educated and successful. Of course, Osuga Zemi wasn't exactly the most generous relative. In fact, he fought with Mema over her children. But Mema's determination was unshaken. Her boy would rise above all that.
Talented, brilliant, incredible.
And so,
amazing.
Elang Sima grew up under the shadow of his strong mother and her endless battles with society. Through his eyes, we also get a vivid picture of how village life worked. We see how the village court operated, where language, proverbs, and clever words could win or lose a case. We see how marriages were contracted, with traditions so detailed that they almost felt like business transactions. And we see, most importantly, a society in transition, moving from the old ways to something new, with education, colonial influence, and independence reshaping the community. In fact, the story opens with a broader reflection on his people's history. We learn about the Big War and how his people fought for the Fulasi, the Zaman, and the Ngues. If you read carefully between the lines, these are the French, the Germans, and the English. We get a quick glimpse of how the Ngabone people gained their independence after the war. These opening sections feel like side stories at first, but they're part of the bigger tapestry Daniel Mengara weaves, a story of a people caught between past and present. The beauty of it is that the narrative never feels like a dry history lesson. Instead, it's wrapped in poetry, proverbs, songs, and stories that lull the senses. And yet, it's not the stereotypical hut and calabash folklore that many expect when they think of African village tales. It's something richer, a blend of the old and the new, tradition and change, tragedy and resilience. But at the heart of it all is Mema herself, the strong, fierce woman who, despite being branded a witch, despite losing so much, still stood firm and made sure her son would have a future. The book I've been describing is Mema by Daniel Mengara, first published in 2003 in the Heinemann African Writers series. What struck me most in this novel is the character of Mema herself. She's unlike the stereotypical portrayals of African women that we often see in literature, the submissive wife, the silent sufferer. Mema is bold, unapologetic, and unafraid to take on roles that society strictly reserved for men. And yes, society punished her for it with gossip and suspicion, but she never bent to those pressures. For me, she represents the modern African woman, the kind I see at work, on the streets, in the markets. Women who, despite having little or no education, take control of their lives, their families, and even their economies. Women who don't sit around waiting for a man's approval, but grab life by the horns and carve out their own path.
You fascinate me.
The narrative style is also fascinating. Through Elang Sima's eyes, the story is fragmented, repetitive, sometimes uncertain, but that's exactly what makes it feel authentic. Memory is never neat and tidy. It's messy, it loops, it questions itself. And Mengara captures that beautifully. There's also a lot packed into these 122 pages. Court systems, traditional marriage customs, the impact of colonial wars, and the slow changes creeping into village life. Yet it never feels overstuffed. The repetition actually emphasizes the key moments and gives the book a kind of poetic rhythm.
That's the good stuff.
If I had one critique, it's that some characters, like the narrator's surviving brother, were left too much on the sidelines. The story focuses so tightly on Mema and the narrator that others feel like shadows in the background. But perhaps that's intentional. After all, this is his memory, and memory has a way of pushing some people into the corners while spotlighting others.
And I was a ghost.
Overall, Mema is a novel that feels both traditional and modern. It's rooted in the wisdom of proverbs and folklore, but it's also sharp, defiant, and forward-looking. It's a story of resilience, of a woman who refused to be broken, and of a son trying to make sense of it all. Now let's talk a little about the author, Daniel Mengara. He was born in a small, poor village in Minvoul, northern Gabon. From those humble beginnings, he pursued education with determination, eventually earning his literary bac in 1987. He studied English at the University Omar Bongo in Gabon before moving to France, where he went on to get his MA, DEA, and finally a PhD in English Studies by 1995. Since 1996, he has been a professor of French language studies and pedagogy at Montclair State University in New Jersey. He's published widely, including novels like Mema and The Song of Chimpanzees. Beyond academia and literature, he also became politically active. In fact, after the death of Omar Bongo in 2009, Daniel Mengara ran as a presidential candidate against Ali Bongo in Gabon. That tells you a lot about him. He's not just a storyteller, but also someone deeply invested in the future of his country. And in 1997, he even founded the Society of Research on African Cultures, or SORAC, an organization dedicated to rediscovering and promoting Africa's historical and cultural heritage. So when you read Mema, You're not just reading a novel, you're stepping into the mind of a man who has one foot in the village and another in the wider world. Someone who bridges tradition and modernity, just like his unforgettable character, Mema. If you're looking for a short but powerful novel, one that blends poetry with history, tradition with modernity, and centers on one of the fiercest women you'll ever meet in African literature, Mema is absolutely worth your time. It's wise, it's beautiful, it's tragic, and it's inspiring. And honestly, after finishing it, you'll probably think twice before underestimating the strength of a woman with a machete in her hand. That's my review of Mema by Daniel Mengara. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.